They were the first to attack Israel after their miraculous escape from Egypt. Not in open battle but cowardly, targeting the weak and weary at the back. The Amalekites, an ancient nation fueled by a deep-seated hatred for God's people, became the symbol of opposition to God's plans. But here's the question that burns in the hearts of many today: does the spirit of Amalek still live among us? Could this ancient hostility still be influencing our world, shaping events and stirring hatred against Israel in modern times? The Bible is not a distant historical record. It is a prophetic mirror. And through it we'll uncover the truth. The ancient battle didn't end in the desert. It continues today, subtly, powerfully, and prophetically. Long before geopolitical maps and news cycles, the story of Israel was already being written by the finger of God. When the Amalekites ambushed the Israelites in Exodus 17, it wasn't merely a military act. It was a spiritual confrontation. God's response wasn't just about justice. It was about legacy. "I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven," he declared. But why such a severe statement? Because Amalek represented something bigger than a tribe. It embodied rebellion against divine order, a relentless resistance to the covenant. In every generation, the spirit of Amalek rises, not just in individuals but in ideologies, systems, and nations that set themselves against God's chosen people. Have you already clicked on the like button and subscribed to the channel? This helps us understand that you are enjoying our videos and YouTube is sending you more. We count on your help. Let's go back to the video. Fast forward to the time of King Saul. God commanded him to destroy Amalek completely. But Saul hesitated, spared the king, and kept the best livestock. That act of disobedience cost him his kingdom. It wasn't just about mercy or strategy, it was about failing to confront evil fully. And here's the lesson for us today. When we compromise with what God has commanded us to confront, we allow the enemy to seed destruction into our future. The spirit of Amalek thrives in complacency. What Saul didn't destroy eventually led to further chaos. Haman, the villain in the book of Esther, descendant of Amalek, nearly orchestrated the genocide of the Jews in Persia. The thread is clear. Amalek doesn't disappear. It waits, it adapts, and it attacks. But how does this apply today? Who or what represents Amalek now? Is it a particular nation, a political movement, or something more spiritual? We must be cautious not to label people, but rather discern the spirit behind the patterns. The spirit of Amalek manifests in the irrational, persistent hatred toward Israel. It's seen in global anti-Semitism, in violent attacks against Jewish communities, and in the political movements that deny Israel's right to exist. It hides under intellectualism, moral relativism, and even within religious institutions that twist scripture against the Jewish people. Amalek is not just a person, it's a posture of defiance against God's covenant and his redemptive timeline. Even Jesus himself, though sent first to the lost sheep of Israel, warned that in the last days, nations would rise against Israel. This hostility is not accidental, it's prophetic. Zechariah 12 verse 3 tells us, "I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all peoples. All who lift it will hurt themselves." This is a warning not just to nations but to hearts. When we align ourselves against Israel, whether through action, silence, or ignorance, we step into dangerous territory. The spirit of Amalek feeds off deception, and deception grows in the absence of truth. This is why believers must be watchful, discerning, and rooted in the Word. Many ask, but why does it matter? Isn't God for everyone now? Yes, the gospel is for all. But God's covenants are never canceled, they're fulfilled. Romans 11 reminds us that the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. The Jewish people remain central to his plan, not because of politics but because of promise. Supporting Israel isn't about nationalism, it's about spiritual alignment. It's about recognizing the root that supports the branches. It's about standing where God stands and refusing to be swept into narratives that sound compassionate but are spiritually compromising. But before we continue, I will leave below a link to one of our ebooks to improve your relationship with God and help you begin to understand the reason for certain things and trust him more. So, how can the spirit of Amalek be resisted today? First, through understanding. Hosea 4 verse 6 says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Ignorance breeds apathy. We must study the Word, understand the covenant, and recognize the prophetic significance of Israel's existence. Second, through prayer. Psalm 122 verse 6 instructs us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This is not a suggestion, it's a command. Prayer aligns our hearts with God's, and it breaks the spiritual strongholds of confusion and hatred. Third, through action. This means standing against anti-Semitism in all its forms, whether in media, politics, or everyday conversations. It means teaching the next generation the truth, even when it's unpopular. There's also a personal dimension. The spirit of Amalek doesn't just oppose Israel externally, it tries to influence believers internally. It whispers compromise when God calls for boldness. It plants doubt when we're meant to walk in covenant. It questions God's promises and lures us into spiritual laziness. But we are not unaware of its schemes. Ephesians 6 reminds us to put on the full armor of God, not for casual defense but for warfare. There's a war for truth, for identity, for purpose. And Israel is often the battleground where those wars manifest most visibly. When you stand with Israel, you are standing for more than a nation. You are standing for God's prophetic timeline, His faithfulness, and His redemptive story. History has shown that every empire that raised its hand against Israel eventually fell. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Rome, each had their moment, but none endured. The pattern remains. Those who bless Israel are blessed. Those who curse her invite judgment. This isn't superstition. It's divine order. Genesis 12 verse 3 says, "I will bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you." The spirit of Amalek wants us to forget this, to dismiss it as ancient thinking. But God doesn't change. His promises are not cultural, they are eternal. And they are still unfolding before our very eyes. What we see in the Middle East today, the rising global pressure on Israel, the manipulation of media narratives, it's all part of a larger spiritual drama. Amalek wants to rewrite history, to erase God's hand, and to separate the church from her Hebraic roots. But we must resist. The church was grafted in, not to replace Israel, but to partner with God's redemptive plan through her. Paul says clearly in Romans 11 verse 18, "Do not boast against the branches." This is a heart check for the church today. Pride, replacement theology, and theological arrogance are modern expressions of Amalek, and we must confront them. There is hope though, and it's not a passive hope, it's an active, prophetic one. God is restoring Israel physically and spiritually. More Jewish people are coming to faith in Yeshua than ever before. Prophecies are being fulfilled, deserts are blooming, and ancient languages are revived. This isn't coincidence, it's divine orchestration. And we are called to witness it, support it, and rejoice in it. Isaiah 62 verses 6 to 7 tells us that God has set watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem who will not be silent. Maybe that's you. Maybe this message is your invitation to become one of those voices. This is not about politics. It's not about sides. It's about aligning with God's heart. Amalek may still be whispering in boardrooms, classrooms, and even pulpits, but its end is certain. Because every time the church wakes up, every time a believer chooses to stand in truth, the power of Amalek is pushed back. And every time you pray for Israel, bless her, defend her, you are fulfilling prophecy. You are participating in God's final chapters. This is your moment. Will you be silent, or will you be a voice of clarity in a time of confusion? Today make a decision. Not just to understand, but to stand. To stand with Israel. To stand against the spirit of Amalek. To walk boldly in alignment with God's eternal covenant. The battle may be ancient, but your role is current. And your voice, your faith, matters.